Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a video on how to replace the mesh on a backyard sliding door. And you can see here, this is the frame. I pulled it out. So this is the actual sliding door. I know you can't even see my mesh. There's no mesh here. It's completely gone. So I have to like completely take it out. It's pretty straightforward. There's a couple of things you need for sure. Now I got this replacement mesh. You can see here. The good news is I got this from Home Depot. I think it's a company called Everbright. The good news is it came with not just the mesh, but it also came with this spline is also called the rubber, which just goes and keeps the net intact. And it also came with the spline roller. I hope I'm saying this right. Yeah, it's the spline roller. You can see here. It came with that and the spline as well. Just nothing but a rubber, just keeps it in place. Now, just to for the people who are doing this for the first time, you'll notice that the two rollers. Just keep in mind they may look the same, but it's not the same. If you look very close at this one has a groove. I'm going to call this the concave groove, and then this one on this side doesn't have a groove. It's a little more sharper. This is the convex groove. I'll tell you what this is used for while I go into the video and I put the net in place. All right, so you definitely need these, and don't forget you may also need just a regular utility knife. But once you've done doing this, this is just to cut off the excess mesh out of the place, and you might also need probably a flat screwdriver. Make sure it's not too sharp. It's got to be a blunt end. I'll tell you why this is needed, because when you go to the corners, you may have to push the rubber in. Because the spline may not be able to do the job for sure, right? The first thing is, if you already have a mesh in place and it's all torn and ripped, you may want to locate, if you look very closely, right at the edge here, see this existing rubber? I already pulled one from one end. So here's the rubber you can see here. So once you pull this off, you gotta use just a screwdriver, pull it off, and you can see here how this is like deeply embedded in, and you can see it just comes off, and it's really nice and tight. You can see here. So this is the old one. Sometimes you can reuse this depending on what's the quality of that. If you don't want to, just make sure you put a new one. Maybe a good practice, just practice doing this rubber by using the old one before you put the actual one. So if I was you, I'll just put it in, just use the spline tool. And you can see, always remember the concave, the groovy part is the one you're going to use to push that rubber all the way in. You can see how it's going in. I'm just applying a little bit of a force, and it kind of seals in place and it goes nice and taut. You see it's tight. When you put this all the way around, the mesh goes nice and tight. Okay, let's pull this off. This is the old one. I don't need that. So this is gone. There we go. And out of its place. Now some doors may have an extra knob on this side, but luckily mine only has one side. If you have one on here, you may have to remove that out, and then you put the net and then put the back on, okay? So mine just on one side, I don't have to remove this. I'm going to keep it on in place, okay? All right, so I'm going to open up the mesh, and I'm going to spread it on this, and let's get started. All right, before you get started, make sure the groove doesn't have any dirt or any existing net in it. Just make sure that you have a nice little clean. If you want, you can use a Q-tip to run it all the way around. I already did that. I'm just making sure there's nothing in the groove. So that is a groove. Make sure it's all nice and clean. All right, so that's a net. I'm going to just put it in place. All right, there you go. Just putting this in place. Just spread it out evenly. Yeah, it might be a good idea to just make sure to tape this screen door down so that if you're going to move it, it doesn't move away. All right, there we go. Let's get it over here. Almost done. And you can see here, this roll is exactly what I need. So make sure to measure your door and get the right size. All right, so that's all set. Now for this door, what I got is, and you can see here, it's 36-inch wide and 84-inch length, just like a regular door size. And you can see it. Now remember, to leave a little bit of a space outside, because once it goes in, you want to have a little bit of a space. This is the ones you got to cut off, the excess ones. And even on the top, just make sure to leave. I got a good length here, so it's sticking out of the dough. So mine's good. So make sure there's a little bit of length left outside the dough. All right, all good. Now, if you guys remember, I mentioned there are two sides of the roller. So the one is the concave end to push the rubber. Now this is the convex end. The reason why this is needed is once you put the mesh in place, now look for the groovy part and just run the convex roller and just create a groove so that you don't want to put too much pressure there. Now you see here, this just creates a little bit of a groove. And you can see here, that's a groove. That's where I'm going to put the rubber. So that's where the other roller comes in handy. If you're wondering why there are two. So you can see here, I'm just creating a nice groove all the way to the end. So this is my starting. So I'm going to start from the top and I'm going to move to the side. And then that'll be my third side. And I'm going to finish off on this side. All right, let's put the rubber in place. Let's see how that goes. All right, you can see here, this is the spine rubber. Now this is nice and round. Some of them may have a triangular shape. You got to be careful. If it's triangular, the sharp end goes inside the groove area and the flat end stays on the top. So I'm just going to have this start right at the corner. I'm just going to push it over there. And I'm just going to start with just pushing with my fingers to make sure it stays in place. Just take it easy and gentle. You don't want to be pushing it too hard to start with. If you're doing this for the first time. So there we go. I'm going to use the concave, the groovy part, to push the rubber in place. Oh, there we go. All right. So I am using a little bit of a force to keep that in. There we go. Nice and deep. It just goes nice and deep there. I can feel it's nice and taut. That's a good idea. Okay, let's come to the side. There we go. That's it, simple as it is. As you can see here, the rubber goes in, keeps it nice and taut. So all I'm going to do is just cover this whole area all the way to the corner. And you can see here, I started right at that edge. Just right above that edge. That's where you start. All right, I'm just going to go and finish this off. All right, I just came to the edge. Now you see here, this is where there's a 90-degree turn. So make sure to push this with your finger, nice and tight. And this is when your flat screwdriver comes in handy. So you're going to use a flat screwdriver, use it to push that in here. But just be careful. Don't make a hole with the screwdriver. This flat needs to be a little blunt, not too sharp. And then you got to push it in. Yep. Once you push that in place, and then you can run the roller here. So this corner is very important. If you don't put the corner in nice and tight, so this rubber, once it slips off, is going to have, this net is going to get loose, okay? Well, you can see here. So I started here. I got the rubber all the way in here. And this is the third end. And you can see I've come to the end here. Now, this is a very important step. When you come to the last portion of the rubber, I mean, this is when you got to be very careful. Just make sure, just going to just probably touch it here. You have to give a little bit of a pull so that it's nice and tight. If not, it's going to leave a slack. So while you're putting the rubber in, give a little bit of a tug. Make sure it's nice and taut. You don't want to pull it too much. And then you got to push that rubber all the way in and then finish off the last portion. All right, you can see here a little bit of a pull, and then I'm pushing it in. And as I pull, you can see here, this is nice and tight. I can feel this is really, really, really tight now. There's no creases, nothing. So this is an important part. So a little bit of a pull, and then you gotta push that spline rubber in place. Nice. All right, I've come to the end. You can see here the two rubbers meet. This is where you gotta be very, very careful. You gotta use the putty knife to slice off the rubber right at that edge. Careful not to put that knife anywhere here, because this net is so taut, even if this accidentally touches, it's gonna completely rip this net. So just be very gentle and cut this portion off right at the edge, and then use the screwdriver to push that rubber in. All right, so there we go. It's nice and deep. Push it in, and you can see they're like seamless right at the corner. All right, might be a good practice just to go around, checks to make sure that. All right, let's see here, that the rubber nowhere is bulged up. If you feel slight bulge, then you may want to push it with a screwdriver, or you can still use a roller. Now you can see a little bit of a bulge here, so I'm going to push this down. So it'd be a good idea to inspect, because the last thing you need is, you got kids, you got pets, they're going to go crash into this net. I know it's nice and taut now. You don't want this rubber popping out. So that's why it's a good idea to check this really well. And the last piece of this is to cut off this excess net on the outside. Now, make sure you use a putty knife. Now, cut right at the edge, just outside of the rubber on that metal piece. And take your time when you do this. Don't rush it, okay? All right, just gonna close this up. So you can see this is the rubber. So my putty knife goes right above. Just gonna focus this. So this is the rubber. It's gonna go right above and then slice it on the metal, and then you can see that this net just comes off. And then you're gonna do all the way around and cut the excess piece off. All right, let's see. There we go. You want to do this very, very gentle. And you can see there's excess net coming off. There you go, easy as it is. Just do this for all the 4 sides, and then, yep, you're done. That's it. Here's the last piece. All right, there we go. Okay. And you can see here, right at the edge. Be very, very careful. There we go. Done. That's it. Last piece. All done. This is nice and taut. Alright, job done. So this took me about less than 20 minutes. Of course, with a little bit of a video shooting, it took a little longer. Right, there we go. That's my finished project. And you can see the net is really nice and tight. All around. All right, that's it. A little bit of a problem solving. I noticed that you may have to give a little bit of an extra pressure on that spline. Other than that, you gotta be very careful with the putty knife. You don't want to be cutting the net anywhere else. All right, hopefully this video helps someone to do their own sliding mesh door. Good luck.